So the way this is going to work today is a little bit different than usual. I'm glad everybody's here and a lot of people are joining. So as the people are joining, I am going to talk about how this is going to work. We have a slide deck prepared, but it's intended to solicit response from everybody participating. You can respond either verbally, hey, my opinion is in my experience. And what we're really trying to do is tap into the group experience and the collective knowledge that exists within this group because we have so many senior people from such a diverse group of areas from engineering to human factors to risk to quality and regulatory. So absolutely chime in the chat, chime in the by joining as a panelist. I would encourage everybody to say what country they're dialing in from and what their main area of focus is, whether it be regulatory, quality, risk, human factors. Um, just, to give us an idea, put that in the chat, and we will go from there. For those of you who aren't aware, we worked with Clarimed to develop a MedTech usability prep kit, which is 21-page guide with that you can use along with the 5-day email companion email course, where every day you get a short exercise delivered to you, understanding different aspect of human factors. This has been another one of our experiments. And I'd love to get your feedback. So if you would like a copy of the prep kit, just write prep kit in the chat, and we'll make sure that you get it one way or another. And now I'm going to go backwards to the first slide, and I'm going to go ahead and kick this off and introduce today's speaker, who is Liz Wellwood, who I met recently. She is Director of Quality Services and Operations at Clarimed. I'm going to let her tell you about her background. Um, but I'd also like to welcome everyone else to the call today. I'm going to encourage as many people as possible to join live. Please don't hijack the call for your own personal benefit, but feel free to contribute. And I would love it if we could go ahead and get started. Hi, Liz. Welcome.
Hello. Thanks, Sean. Thank you everyone for being here. I'm super excited to come and speak, or at least lead the conversation on this topic. Um, I have been living my world in quality for the past 14 years, and all of that has been in consulting. Um, and so I've been with Clarimed for about 2 years now. And before that, I was with a consulting firm that only did quality. So I've seen quite a lot of things go really, really well and not so well throughout my career. But I am, I would say I definitely do not have all the answers, but I am very excited about the topic we're going to go through today. And as Sean mentioned, the goal of this or the hope for this session is that it's a little bit more interactive and collaborative, um, and that we can just all kind of bring our collective experience into the conversation. And so, in order to do that, it does require some participation. So, as we go through the slides, you'll see prompts, and we'll ask you to drop your answer in the chat. And then we'll call on a couple of you to kind of join in on the conversation. And there will definitely be times where if I get asked a question, I might toss it back to the group. I think there's a wealth of knowledge here, and I'd love to tap into that. All right, let's get rolling. So the party really starts now. For me, this slide is kind of the heart of why we're here. Like I said, I spent my entire quality career has been in consulting. And I've kind of always seen human factors as being integrated into the quality system. So coming to Clarimed and experience other type of clients and not really seeing that connection everywhere has been a little surprising to me. Um, but human factors kind of sneaks into our work in ways that we may not even realize, right? So anytime we question a design step, anytime a CAPA uncovers unexpected user behavior, anytime an IFU gets rewritten because people keep doing it wrong, that's all human factors kind of like tumbling its way into our world and into our work. Um, and it just I think sometimes it doesn't really get noticed. Um, and what I really want to do here is ground this conversation in all of our collective experience. So in a moment, I'm going to prompt you guys, the first prompt of the morning or day, depending on where you're calling from. I'm going to ask everyone to complete the sentence in the chat. Human factors shows up in my work when. But first, I wanted to kind of break the ice by sharing one of my own experiences of when I say human factors kind of slammed its way into my work. um, there was one point in my career I worked with the design team, um, and my kind of team was brought in to support the protocol creation, the report creation, and then helping put all of the data analysis together. And one thing that kept coming up in this particular device was there was a step that users kind of consistently either skipped or misunderstood. The step itself, like when you took a step back, the step itself wasn't intuitive. It wasn't like visible enough in the workflow. And the designs team immediate reaction was, okay, like let's just get back to training and let's really kind of hone in on this particular task. Um, and when you take a step back and you think about humans and using these devices, um, human factors really encourages us to take a step back, take a step back and ask a different question. Um, are we trying to train the user out of a design problem, right? Are we trying to fix something with training that really just won't, it can't be fixed? And once you apply that lens, and in this situation, when we applied that lens, it became very clear that this was not a training issue. The user interface itself was driving the confusion. The task really didn't align with the user's natural expectations or mental model, right? Like how they visually in their mind see this working. Um, and from there, we were able to kind of like revisit the user interface and the task flow and set it up in a way that it was more visible and intuitive. And from that point on, the issues with that particular step stopped. People were continuing to actually follow the steps and not skip steps. And when I think about this distant memory, this to me is such a great way that we kind of show how human factors strengthens the quality system. Training is essential, right? And humans definitely impact training, but it's not a substitute for a good design, right? So um, there was some tweaking that had to be done here. And once that was done, that kind of human error that we thought we were seeing, like it was kind of fixed and no longer an issue. So now I want to turn to the chat. And I'm going to ask Sean to call on a couple of people. We want to like expand a little bit um, on what you've dropped in there as when human factors has kind of slammed its way into your work world.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask Bijan to share.
Okay. Yeah. So human factors is a major player in safety risk management, which is my world. And in fact, it's been said that it's the largest contributor to medical device safety risks, far more than the design failures or software failures. And creating a intuitive and understandable interface with for a user is not an easy thing.
Yeah.
And I think all of us who have been involved in creation of medical devices. I mean, some things like a tongue depressor maybe is easy, but when you get more complicated, it's not so simple. So it is a major challenge, and I think human factors is really one of the largest contributors to device safety.
Yeah, I totally agree. And you're right, it's not a simple task. But I think humans in our nature, we're so complicated that it makes sense. But I do think it is such an important part of design safety that I think sometimes gets downplayed a bit. I don't know if you guys agree with that, but I've seen it kind of throughout my career. Um, so do we want to pull on some other chats?
Absolutely. Let's hear from Hendrik for a moment if he's online. Are you live, Hendrik?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, so as I told you, I work in human factors and usability engineering, so I see it all day. And what's interesting to me is that other than understanding our users, we tend to forget that we also have to understand our client contacts. If I'm talking to a risk management professional, if I'm talking to a risk manager and supporting use-related risk analysis, then I have to understand that they have a different view of all of this, and that I have to cater the human factors contents that I want to be included in the risk management to them in a way that leads to inclusion and proper mitigation.
Let's let's keep moving forward because we got a lot to get through. But I think we're starting to get the hang of this, and I would, encourage you to raise your hand if you'd like to share. But we will keep moving. Is that okay, Liz?
Yeah, let's roll.
Keep moving.
Yes, and Sean, we do have a question in the chat.
Yeah.
Is human factors similar to usability? Could you please provide the specific example of human factors?
I would love for maybe one of our human factors experts to jump in and answer that question.
Yeah, sure. I can speak
thanks,
to that if
Louisa.
you like. No problem. Louisa Harvey from Clarimed. Is human factors similar to usability? Absolutely is. And the wording is used interchangeably. I know if you actually looked at the dictionary definition of both of them, there will be a slight nuance between the two. However, as far as the FDA is concerned and other regulators, they consider usability and human factors are the same thing. So that's probably the easiest way of describing it. One thing that is different is user research. That's a separate topic and can get confused with usability, but anybody else can feel free to chip in on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think in my world, when I was doing a lot of hiring of human factors, the professionals, I would get a lot of usability engineers applying to the roles. And in that case, at least for the role that I was looking for, they didn't have the experience that I wanted. And what was the experience that I wanted? It was working in a regulated environment. So there can be a lot of usability work in all of the products that we use around us commercially, but not all of those are regulated like medical device. And that's where you see a lot of the human factors experience coming through is in, aerospace and medical device, and you really get to know your regulations. So I think even though they can technically be very, very similar and related, it's the regulations that get you on the human factor side, in my experience.
Good old regulation.
Carrie, would you like to comment on that?
If you don't, the engineers don't always seem to get it. in my experience, and then trying to explain to them that we need to start early in the process, and it's the critical task, and bringing it back to the human, and the intended use and the health factors. They just, a lot of times it's just the connection there seems to. I don't know, Liz, you can probably speak to it as well, but the critical tasks, they seem to get really confused, and you need to dictate how your design choices also affect the regulatory outcomes, and you need to start early. And
Yeah.
it's, the FDA, and when you're building a device or a drug or anything like that, it all has to do with your user inputs and the actual what you're building in your market outcomes. So, your marketing team has these user or marketing or whatever you want to call it at the beginning of what they want to do, and they all need to trace back. And it's a big old circle, and it's not that hard.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say that though, Carrie, because I think before I came to Clarimed, human factors usability always kind of seemed like this, like incredibly, I'm not saying it's easy, right? And there's
Right.
complexity to it, but it was just like this mystified process that kind of always seemed really like beyond me kind of thing. And then I actually am working with people that specialize in usability and human factors, and it it seems like it's not as difficult or as this kind of like mind-blowing concept as I thought before. So it is interesting to kind of see how other people work, how they're different, like a quality engineer versus somebody that like they do human factors and that's kind of what they do. It's been a really interesting experience for me, to say the least.
And to
Can I
try to
add something here?
simplify it for all the groups, because you need to bring all the groups together early and
Yeah.
it's basic. It's not that hard. And as long as everybody's together in the beginning and see how it rolls all the way down and then bring it all back together at the end, that it makes it easy if you bring it, start at the beginning and let everybody see how it trickles down at the end.
Yeah.
Let everybody work together in their silos, and then at the end have it as a big surprise that, oh, it's the big usability and it's afraid. Because the FDA, that's what they want to see at the end. It's, you don't want to redesign it at the end and say, oh, we have to do this huge usability and
Yeah.
it's this big ominous thing. It's not. It's honestly, it's pretty simple. So
I want to
I
add
think we
something.
can move forward.
yeah, sorry, Sean.
And then, I mean, there's gonna be time. We have a lot of slides. We have a lot to cover, and I want to make sure that Alexandra, you can comment in the next section. There we go. But let's move forward.
I could definitely, I could keep talking about that, Carrie, forever, but thank you, Sean, for keeping us on track. So right now we're looking at what we're calling the structural spine. These are some pretty pivotal pieces of a quality system, right? Design, risk, V&V, labeling, suppliers, training, complaints, etc. Right? This really is the spine that keeps your quality system upright. Some pretty big elements of it, anyways. And this kind of goes on to what we're talking about, or what Carrie was saying. Something that I've seen, and it varies, right? Like companies kind of do what they want when they want. And as consultants, we can do our best to try to kind of advise the way that we think it might be easier. And something that I've always found interesting is teams kind of experience human factors at different points along the spine, right? So some see it in early design, others feel it in risk reviews, right? And then and some don't see its impact until post-market surveillance, which seems crazy to me. But I do kind of want to open up the chat again. So let's just kind of go over where you guys see human factors pop up in the quality system first. I think it's an interesting topic to discuss as a group.
That's great. So I'm going to turn to Leah first.
Ooh. Previous to this role, it happens in this role too, but in my last role, I was at a company for 11 and a half years, and I got to be on the core team. And that experience, before HF existed on that in the 11 and a half years. They didn't have human factors on the core team. It wasn't part of the corporate structure. And they didn't have enough knowledge with any of the other team members between marketing, quality, R&D, clinical, medical. They knew it was in the background, but they didn't have the knowledge or the experience to know the importance of it for the product that we were making, which was a home use pump, wearable pump. And they very quickly realized that they needed someone on the core team who knew what they were talking about. So that in that experience, you really see the interaction from start to beginning in product development, where I was working with marketing to develop user needs, doing marketing studies, different heuristic analyses, contextual inquiry studies. We're going into the places where people are using similar products to watch how they were observed, how they were using products, not just how they said they use them, but how they actually use them. What are their workarounds that we have to account for? And then quality was my best friend. Even I love quality. They're the ones doing all of the risk analysis, usually, right? So whatever the R&D team and whatever the teams are building, they have to demonstrate to quality as like the police, right, in the industry, to say, hey, yeah, this product's not safe yet. Keep going. To show that your risk management process is underway and that you've got all the mitigations in place. And then from the medical clinical side, is your product meeting the needs from a clinical efficacy perspective? And some of that, especially for home use devices, lay people do all kinds of crazy things that you expect, and they still have to be able to, have a clinically relevant product in the end. So working very closely with clinical and medical affairs to understand, what's important for the users, how do you get this across to the users to make sure they're using it correctly. And then regulatory, again, another close arm in arm function where you've got to make sure that you're meeting the regulatory requirements and in the very specific ways of going about structuring your studies to make sure you're not biasing and you're not, doing something wrong, because it can be very, very specific. You can do one little thing and the FDA is like, nope, you did that wrong. Try again. And that's an expensive mistake to make, especially in HF. So that was one of my favorite roles. And when we touch on it here at Clarimed, working with our different clients, there's different functions and that you have to interact with. And some of them come along more strongly at different levels of the project or different periods of the project development process. But as a human factors engineer, we need every part of the product to be running in synchrony before we can take the final commercialized product and validate it. So you got to know what everyone else is doing and you got to meet their needs too. So it's a really cool place to be in human factors engineering usability. Touch them all. I think, what was the beginning of the question? Where did you first touch base with? That's really how it happens.
I know. I feel like
Alejandros, you wanted to share something, I believe. Did you have your hand up? Yes, no? No?
I did a while ago, but the point that I wanted to share was about engineers and the decisions that they make. I've seen engineers make decisions that are completely reasonable and rational, but because they don't understand the clinical context, the decision's wrong. And it's to know the significance of a decision, you need to understand the context. And that's often why engineers make decisions that don't work in medical device development, in my experience.
Context is everything, absolutely. And the clinical context in particular. Excellent point. Thank you for sharing that. So if everybody wants to drop in to the chat, for most teams, where does human factors enter the quality system first? Then I think we can move on to the next slide, maybe.
I just want to, kind of touch on like some of what Leah was saying. The way that I look at this, like what we're calling structural spine, is human factors supports each of these segments, and it kind of strengthens like design decisions, risk files, training, etc. And I think understanding like the interconnectedness of all of like the pieces that go into device, right? Or like making something is kind of what helps the team um, integrate the human factors pieces a little bit more proactively than like reactively. I saw someone said like in the chat, having it early on is kind of ideal, and I could not agree more. I think the same way about quality system implementation. All right, let's rock and roll. All right, so now that we've kind of seen where human factors, very briefly, high level, fits along that structural spine of the quality system, let's look at a practical tool that kind of anchors all of these touch points together, right? The URA. I'm sure everyone here is super familiar with that. And one helpful way to think about the URA is that it actually represents the structure of human factors itself, right? Users, who they are, what they bring to the interaction, the related requirements, what we expect them to do successfully, the risk, what could go wrong and why, and then the analysis, the evidence and rationale of our decision. It gives us a very clean, intuitive way to kind of break down human factors activities, whether you're new to this or like a seasoned veteran. Let's look for my prompt. I definitely want to kind of touch on what you think is the most challenging part of URA. I think I'm going to add kind of my own input or opinion here. And I think from what I've seen in my experience, right, I'm no real HF expert, but I think like user groups, like defining the different user groups, I think it's easy maybe to assess or figure out what that primary group is. But, as you kind of go along through the process, different user groups maybe pop their heads up. And I think that might be a little bit more challenging. But I definitely want to hear from some of the folks on here that work in HF as like their day-to-day. What do you think is the most challenging part of the URA? And we'll call on a couple of people. And we do have some examples listed here. For use, we didn't consider caregivers, risk. A step we assumed was obvious turned out to be confusing. I'm sure everyone has seen that a ton of times. We didn't define acceptable success criteria. I swear I can talk this morning. And then analysis, we didn't document the evidence behind our decisions, which I've also seen many times. But definitely want to call on a couple people. Sean, if you can help me.
I'll keep talking if you want.
All right, go for it, Lee. I love it.
If they want. So here at Clarimed, we see a lot of URAs from our clients, and we are tasked with overhauling them quite frequently, or at least providing additional guidance. So where there's gaps, or we'll just do a gap analysis on a URA. And I think a couple of things that I see quite frequently are people not having a clear, but basically doing a hazard analysis first. What are the hazard situations that would cause a specific harm, and the kind of having that base structure before you even going into a URA really helps you just kind of pick and grab from your hazard analysis to say, all right, this potential use error has occurred. What's the hazard and harm associated with that? You don't have to think about it every time you come to a new line item. You pick it from your hazard analysis, and sometimes we have people who have a hazard that maybe the harm is it's a cut or it's a laceration, and it has a severity of maybe 2, and then down the line they have another cut or a laceration and they have a severity of 4, and that the FDA really likes to see like maybe it's a minor cut, a major cut, kind of segmenting out what those harms are, so you don't have the same different severities of harm for the same harm. That is a big one. We see it all the time.
Mm.
And then properly explaining the hazardous situation or the potential use error is a big one.
In addition to that, Leah, I've just noticed some really great comments in the chat. So yeah, thank you everyone for inputting into there. But I did notice the challenges. Somebody's written, I think it's Catherine, the challenges we get is being able to understand the product enough and relying on those who understand the product to help and drive the task analysis. And I absolutely see that for sure. There's two issues. One is getting access to the right people to speak to actually input into it instead of people sitting in front of their Excel spreadsheets, guessing in essence what the outcomes could be. And then on the other hand, it's also getting access to the product. Would you believe it? And I have actually seen instances where people have written a URA, and I've spoken, so clients come to me, they've written a URA, and I said, okay, great, I'm going to check it. Could I have a look at the product, please? And they've said, oh, we've had to write it without the product because we can't get hold of it. And it's normally large companies, large medical device companies, and it's literally been written blindly. And that's one thing that I definitely find is a problem.
Yeah, agreed. And someone in the comments wrote, shouldn't the harm definitions come from risk management? Absolutely true. That hazard analysis is a cross-functional effort from quality, medical clinical affairs, R&D. It's a group effort. It should not come from HF, actually. It can, part of it, but that's a tool for HF, I would say.
Yeah. So if anyone else that wants to speak in, thank you, Louisa and Leah, our HF experts on the call, saving the day.
David has his hand up.
I get a drop.
No.
Sorry.
Liz,
Have a good one, Leah.
Liz, I'll just say when I'm in the middle of them, you get your guys in the middle of your when you're in your actual studies doing them, the stakeholders always like to say, well, I've always done it this way. Why are we trying to do this new
Someone
study?
needs to mute.
Separating the old habits from the new habits when we have a new device out there.
Yeah, I think, I don't know about everyone else, but I've seen that so much, not even just in like design or human factors, even in quality. It's like people don't want to be challenged or have their like normal way of thought process challenged. It's interesting, and it is a difficult hurdle to kind of get over. What have you done in those? I don't know if this is hijacking, but I'm just curious, Carrie, like in your experience, like how have you kind of dealt with those moments?
You have to, I mean, it becomes a fight, right? So you have to try to, it's conventional wisdom versus the evidence. So
right.
A lot of time it's black and white. So you have to, depends who your audience is, right? So if it's engineers, it's bullet point. And so you have to demonstrate the evidence versus the, validate it with human factors evidence. And so you have to go in and pinpoint the user interactions that rise, basically, perform those that have been performed that could cause harm, which requires evidence of judgment and defensible rationale. And so, risk assessments are so, I mean, it's perception, right? Who has all done risk assessments here, right? It's
yeah, no, I appreciate you
sharing.
That
should be a 5.
Yeah. I think it's good to talk about that. I think everybody,
so
if
Liz,
they haven't yet. Yeah.
Unless David, before we move on, I just wanted to understand if you're going to talk about off-label use or maybe expected off-label use, anticipated, and how are you controlling for that, or others, or might some of us say, forget about it, it's not in the use indication, or, oh my goodness, this could be a potential, which we may not see until complaints come up about how somebody uses our products. But I wonder, what are we doing upfront, perhaps, to prevent or control?
I don't think we have that built into these slides. We do touch a little bit on like IFUs and things like that, but that's a really good question. And what I've seen companies do is they actually do like usability studies on the labeling or the instructions themselves. I don't know if this has answered your question the way you're hoping, but that was something that recently I had the opportunity to kind of just take a little QA dip into some data for a recent study we did. And it was a client that did their validation with us and then came back and decided to do a supplemental validation just on the IFU itself or the user guide. I'm not sure, I can't remember exactly what they were calling it, but it was their way of trying to proactively make sure that the labeling, the instructions made sense to the actual end user because this was a consumer product. And I thought it was really great that they were doing that. And they gave the participants about 3 different versions of their instructions for use or whatever they were calling it. So I actually thought I was really, really like kind of pumped on that because to me, that just showed that the manufacturer actually cares that this device is going to be used as intended and it's easy to use. And they hit all kinds of demographics there. So I thought it was really awesome. I don't know if that answers your question, but that in my head is kind of one way I've seen it kind of be proactively prioritized.
No, that's fine. And I just, Kelly just put a comment up. As I understand, the agency believes it is your responsibility to anticipate it can be used off-label, and it becomes our responsibility to control for that as best we can.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, there are crazy people out there who stretch to the far extreme, but yeah, thanks. Let's go to Henrik.
Yeah, I actually wanted to react to your question. Because with usability engineering, according to IEC 623661, off-label use is most closely resembled by the defined abnormal use, and the 2016 guidance by the FDA concerning usability and human factors engineering for medical devices also specifies this as abnormal use. Abnormal use is not part of usability or human factors engineering. But in human factors or usability engineering, we can find indications for off-label use or for abnormal use, and we have to forward it to the risk management because risk management, according to ISO, 14971, is doesn't exclude this off-label use. So we actually don't have to deal with it. But if it happens, then it becomes foreseeable. And if it's foreseeable, then we have to inform the ones who do risk management on foreseeable use, which includes this off-label use.
Thank you for sharing. Jumping in there.
Let's keep moving. Let's go to design controls, if we may. What human factors elements belong in user needs? Examples, use environments, critical tasks, user limitations. While Liz helps us understand this slide.
Yeah, this is going to be a totally interactive slide. As we all are aware, I'm sure. Design control, it's one of the biggest opportunities for human factors to make an impact, but only if we capture the right things early. So let's kind of work together. I'm not sure how we're going to input this, Sean. Maybe you can help us there, but let's gather what belongs in human factors. Human factors aware design controls, right? So let's, I guess, put in the chat. Sean, is that what we're going to do?
Yeah, let's use the chat vigorously. Let's let the chat build the document, as well as, calling on people to join in. Who wants to start? For us here.
I'd like to say something.
Please do.
In my experience,
Tell us
you
who you
do a
are.
lot of, huh?
Tell us who you are.
I'm one of the engineers that people
Oh no.
Okay. Core engineers.
core engineers. Now, in my experience, you like to do a lot of formative testing before design controls kick in, because when design controls could kick in, it becomes harder to change things and more expensive. And then again, usability testing, acquiring usability information is quite expensive. So people like to, you don't want to spend a lot of money up front. And in my experience, you see that first you have your formative testing and you design something, and in the end you have your summative testing to verify that you've done it right. And what they like to see from the summative testing is that your design was right and not that there are new factors kicking in, because then you have to change it again. So there's the problem with usability testing is that it's so expensive to do. It's the same with clinical evaluation studies. So they are expensive, and you don't want to do it too much, because then you don't make any money out of your product anymore. So I'd like to see your opinion of Clarimed on what the most efficient way of doing this is, on how to implement this in your design process.
That's a tough question. I'd like to take a moment to do a commercial here. If you haven't requested your prep kit from Clarimed, please just write prep kit into the chat and we will make sure that you get a copy of the prep kit. Similarly, they're offering a 7-point usability assessment. If you would like a 7-point usability assessment with one of their team members, to talk with one of their team members about what you're working on, please, put that in the chat that you would like a 7-point assessment, or just write the word assessment, and somebody will reach out to you. That's it for my interruption. Sorry.
Thanks, Sean. Are we getting kind of the fill-ins in the chat? I don't know that I'm seeing. So what HF elements belong in user needs? Inputs must reflect, output should demonstrate.
Let's turn it over to a member of the committee. Who would like to join in on this?
I know that design teams like to have the design controls carved in stone so that they don't change anymore, because the how do you call it, when requirements change over time, then it becomes expensive again. And then again, the world evolves around you, so there will always be changes when you design something. But at least the requirements should be formulated well, that you have a requirement that you can test either with summative formative testing or by analysis or by whatever. So they must be really hard to test, easy to test, hard in stone.
Thank you. There have been a number of comments. User needs should capture the needs of all the identified users, not just the primary user. Similarly, different user groups. Let's talk about user groups for a moment. Who are they? How do they change depending on the device, depending on the use environment? One of the examples that I love is emergency use devices, because emergency use devices are oftentimes used by the least qualified users. with the fewest amount of instructions, and usability needs to be pretty simple, versus a complex surgical tool that is only used by physicians in the operating room. So these things heavily impact how the training and detail. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I'd just
Thoughts?
like to add to that actually. It's something that made me actually focus on human factors as a career when I was looking at specific user groups for a product. And you would have assumed the user groups were very, very similar. It was working on the product sumatriptan, which I'm sure many people have heard of, for the treatment of migraine. And this particular product has two user groups, migraine and cluster headache. And I was told by the engineering team that they were the same group and just to treat them as such. But I started to investigate it a little bit because I didn't feel quite right about that. And then I realized that cluster headache actually is predominantly occurs in men. And so 90% men, whilst migraine would be 80% women. And cluster headaches come on at 4 a.m. in the morning. So typically in the dark when you're trying to fumble around finding the device, whilst migraines come on at 10 a.m. in the morning. And cluster headaches is actually far more severe as a condition than migraine. And that particular piece of research and then speaking to those groups and realizing that actually had to design really quite different injection devices really fascinated me. And from then on in, I've been extremely fascinated about different user groups and just making sure you do check each one when you're carrying out your research.
I would love to see me trying to read those tiny instructions at 4 a.m.
I don't think they can turn on the light because it's so severe as well. So they'd be fumbling around in the dark because it's absolutely excruciating, this particular type of headache.
Shall we move to risk management?
Let's do it.
Okay.
All right, so we're going to shift over to risk.
Who are risk people on the call? Raise your hand. There you go, Bailey. Hi.
I can't see, but I know you guys are there. So yay. Risk is where human factors is obviously becomes, at least in my opinion, super essential. Design controls capture what we expect users to do, and risk management forces us to ask ourselves, like, what could actually go wrong? This is another interactive slide. But something that I've seen recently is just kind of during studies, there was a moment where there was like a safety cap that needed to be removed before like you can activate the device. I think in the engineering minds, right? No hate to the engineers. This was like this I think was thought of as like a very obvious, like low risk step. But the it wasn't. And multiple users try to activate this device with the cap still on. And so it kind of made them think the device wasn't working. They kept like pressing it harder. They even tried to like twist and unlock the device. And it really wasn't like something that they had captured beforehand of what could go wrong with the device. And so it kind of helped us, using the URA helped us break it down. But that's just like one example of something that I've seen where it seemed so obvious. It was a low risk step, but it ended up causing like a lot of issues. So we definitely want to make this interactive again. What is a use related hazard you've seen catch a team off guard? So mine was just kind of like that cap not wanting to come off, and I'd love to hear from the group.
I can give an example.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. One of the devices I used to work on many years ago was a peritoneal dialysis system where the patient is supposed to connect a tube that goes inside of their belly to a device that's outside of their body. So while they're sleeping, they're getting dialyzed. And cleanliness and aseptic technique is incredibly important because you have a tube that's open to the inside of your belly, so infections are very possible, and in fact happen a lot. So we had planned all kinds of training and emphasizing the importance of proper action and cleaning and all that. So we did a formative test, and this was in Japan. I was just observing because I'm not a human factors person. I'm from risk management. So I was just looking and I noticed how one of the users, as an elderly man, totally ignored all the instructions and with an unclean hand touched the part that was going into his belly. And I was just amazed and he was totally like thinking, oh yeah, isn't this right? Isn't this how I'm supposed to do it? That's one experience.
Thank you for sharing. I mean, I've never seen it to that extent, but I definitely think this is where like thinking of all user groups, I think we mentioned on the previous slide, is so important. Just you have to kind of, take into account the different people that'll be using the device. And
I find that as I'm an engineer, but I find as an engineer, sometimes we just cannot possibly fathom the things that people do. And this is, I mean, it's sometimes mind-boggling, and this is why we really need human factors people, because the engineer's mind comes from a different angle. As Luke was talking about earlier, we are thinking about how it should be done, and in our mind it looks just reasonable and rational. But then when you put it in the hands of the user, it's from a totally different angle, and that's why we need human factors.
Yeah, totally agree. Could not agree more. Thank you for sharing, Bijan. Does anyone else want to jump in with an example?
A comment here. So I would like to share my experience from combination product perspective. So the risk management sometimes needs to also consider the negative transfer. Depending on the user, there might be auto injectors transfer to multiple dose injectors. So there are risks related to that too.
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Sean, do we want to call on any more, or should we move on?
May I speak?
Sure. Thanks, Peter.
One of the earlier participants, I think it was Luke, made the comment that usability testing was very expensive, but I think it's absolutely essential, because I had an absolute revelation in terms of the benefits of software usability testing by having the opportunity to see the software usability testing lab that Rabobank had built in the Netherlands. And that was just an absolute revelation. And it's what has convinced me, or allowed me to develop such an interest in human factors, the importance of design and anticipating, or trying to anticipate how users will use the software in their environment.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. I know that comment caught my attention as well. I'm not wanting to spend the money up front. But I know I've definitely seen where that unfortunately backfires on an organization. They didn't want to spend the money up front, right? But then there was a labeling issue, I think is what it was. And they ended up having to do a recall, and the amount of money, resources that go into that, you kind of have to weigh, like, well, should we have done the human factors usability testing? Something really good to think about. There are consequences, unfortunately, and they litter and overwhelm your already overwhelmed quality team. All right. We're going to move on to verification, validation, and IFUs, everybody's favorite thing. This is where we find out if the design actually works for real people, right? It gets out of the mirrors, and can it be used the way that it was intended to use with the particular user groups? I think, I'm sure everyone here has a funny IFU story. I've definitely been in scenarios where users are working with out-of-date IFUs and trying to make a button click to follow the IFU, and there was never a click. That was just the IFU was like 2 inches behind. Yes, instructions for use. I actually saw a comment. Yay. We're talking about instructions for use. I definitely want, again, we're going to open up the conversation. Like we said, this is going to be interactive and collaborative. You know, we all know that IFUs can make or break safe use. And I definitely want to know, in your experience, what do you think makes the IFUs clearer? I think I recently spoke about the supplemental study where a client was just testing their instructions for use, which I loved. It was really cool to see, but it was interesting to see what the participants were saying, right? Like they wanted to see the difference in font color. If something is like danger zone, like let's make that red. And so they love to kind of see the symbols, and they wanted, I think some of the feedback was like, hey, make the font bigger, right? You have to think about people that maybe don't have the best eyesight, things like that, myself included. So let's hear from the chat for things that, something that you think makes an IFU actually clear, and that maybe in your experience, we can do IFUs a little bit better, create these IFUs so they're actually user friendly. And we'll open the floor up for convo. Less wording. I kind of agree, because like I don't want to sit there and read a book like during COVID, having to kind of like pick up those, you know, and you're like head's foggy and trying to figure out how to use the device. There's so many words. I think pictures definitely help. Does anybody want to jump on and kind of speak to their, I'm seeing a lot of images. Couldn't agree more. I think a lot of people are visual learners, so like that definitely helps.
It can help you, Liz. I've written a lot of them.
All right, Carrie.
Yeah. So FDA likes over the, you know, human, like if it's going over the counter direct for use, they need to be in the 5th grade language. It's an FDA thing. If you're going for surgeons, it needs to be written for the 8th grader, because doctors read at an 8th grade level. So we got to keep that in mind. If it's over the use, they like pictures, it needs to be clear, written in plain, direct terms that match about vocabulary, mental models for the intended user. So no regulatory jargon, no engineering shorthand. So keep it simple. Make sure you highlight the steps. If performed incorrectly, it could cause harm. So you need to have it into your usability study. So usually your user inputs follow your IFU. It's a very simple way to write your usability study. You just follow your IFU and there's your user needs. There you go, right, Liz? And follow a logical flow. It's a very easy way to write your risk analysis and your usability study. Use your IFU and use your visual support. Yeah.
I think a very useful addition as well is the quick reference guide. I've seen that get people out of very, very tricky situations in human factors studies. So that's when you've got the formal IFU, and then it's condensed into something that is a bit more marketing orientated, a small little booklet, and it's just got the key points. I find people typically go to that because it looks more user friendly anyway.
Like a quick start guide, is that what you?
Yeah, it's called a QRG, so quick reference guide. Yeah, and it's normally hung on the machine if it's with a medical device. I've also seen it done with auto injectors, and I've found it's been really, really good having that.
Yeah, I am definitely like a skip the long-winded instructions person and then find the quick, like, how to do it. And then I'll struggle and then end up reading it.
Yeah, it's defensible. It has risk control and it protects your patients and accelerates your regulatory review at the end of the day.
Yes, very important.
loves it. It's easy and has your critical tasks right there. It's naturally flowable and it's a validated practice. You're done.
Yes.
Done and done.
Sean, I just realized we are out of time.
That means we have another seminar for next week, right?
The finish. We did. Sean, are you there? Hello?
Right. Yes, I'm here. I've been
Okay.
talking.
Sorry.
Yeah, so we're at time. Anybody that would like the slide deck so they can continue their learning, please just write slides in the chat, and we'll make sure that you get a copy of the slides. And I want to thank everybody for showing up. A reminder that the day after Christmas, we're not going to have a Friday in Focus call, and I don't think we're going to have one on the 2nd because I don't think anybody really wants one on the 2nd unless you disagree with me. If you disagree with me, then please let me know. I would like to remind you that next week we're going to have Tino Chow, who's going to be explaining to all of us, no matter what we do, how to become memorable within 2 minutes, how to make your MedTech device memorable in 2 minutes. And so he's really focused on messaging and on standing out in a crowded room. I think that's something everyone can benefit from. Reminder,
Sounds
there
awesome.
are 2 important MedTech Leading Voice webinars happening next week. One on the 18th, 2 days after the supposed announcement from the EU of the proposed MDR revision. This is going to be huge. We're going to have 2 speakers from BSI, 1 speaker from Scarlett, 1 speaker from Acroteam, reviewing the proposed revisions, assuming they drop. If they do not drop, they're going to be speculating on that. So, this is kind of an iffy webinar. And the other webinar is on masterclass with Rob Packard, I believe the day before, which is going to be on how to become a lead auditor for software as a medical device. If you have any interest in augmenting your income in 2026, I suggest tuning in to that important and informative discussion with Rob. Again, I'd like to say that if you're working on human factors or a device and you would like guidance from Clarimed, just write guidance in the thing and somebody will reach out to you. I'm sorry that we didn't get through everything today, but this is a work in progress. We're still trying to figure out how to get all of you to come off mute mode and to share your knowledge with the rest of us. I'd like to thank everybody who participated today, particularly Liz, for her willingness, and Louisa and Leah and Kelly and Victoria and everyone from Clarimed for their willingness to be guinea pigs in this live discussion. And everyone, of course, who contributed or even showed up, because showing up is contributing. On that note, I want to wish everybody a very happy holiday, and give Liz a chance to say goodbye.
Yeah, thank you all for having me and going through my rambling. I really appreciate all the participation. This was my first webinar, so I appreciate your guys' patience. Thank you all. Have a great rest of your Friday.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
you, Liz.
Bye.